Thank you very much for having us here today. I'm Andy Robinson from the Smart Energy Design Assistance Center in Champaign. We're part of the Illinois Energy Now program. I'm here with Robert Nemeth, who's an architect, and Robert's helping me out, helping work the crowd. I'm helping work some of the technical details here. So what we wanted to do was be able to present this as a live stream as well to anybody that couldn't make the meeting today, and record it so that if anybody needs to review it, you can go back to the website at the end. The presentation will be on our website. And the recording, barring any technical difficulties, the recording will be worked on the website as well. So I just wanted to, we basically are going to go for about an hour on this talk, wrap up maybe an hour 15, something like that, but also include information and comments from the audience, from experience that you facilities managers are having in your buildings, any of your district questions and issues that come up with incentives, with energy efficiency projects. Thank you very much for inviting us here today, and let's get started. So the Illinois Energy Now program is under the Department of Commerce in the state, and we're partners with the Energy Resource Center at University of Illinois Chicago, with the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, with SEDAC, which has a branch in Champaign, where our office is, but also a branch in Chicago with the 360 Energy Group. So it's a public-private partnership that we are able to do a portion of the projects in-house, and a portion of the projects are contracted out to the private sector contractors throughout the state to help with energy assessments, to really reach every corner of the state. So it's a model of really spreading out throughout the entire region. This mentions the public-private partnership through the Department of Commerce, University of Illinois, 360 Energy Group, the Energy Resource Center in Chicago. And our goal is to help reduce the energy footprint of the state of Illinois. We do. So we have SEDAC free services, include outreach and training, energy assistance, assessments. We work with new construction, design assistance. So on the early side of new construction, trying to help the architects and engineers make a better building, but then also new construction incentives, so giving incentives for going beyond code. We'll touch on these a little bit today towards the end. We have some energy performance contracting support for looking at energy service contracts. There's a person that helps review contracts with our program and helps make sure that those contracts are all kosher. We'll talk about retro-commissioning a bunch today and application assistance for these incentives. Just a sort of a graphic breakdown of where the energy or where the money flows. So we have ComEd and Ameren on the electric side, Nicor, Peoples, Ameren, North Shore on the gas side. They collect energy efficiency funds on our bills, and 75% of that goes to the private sector on either side, on electric and gas, and then 25% of it goes to the energy efficiency for public sector buildings. So that includes governments, K-12 schools, community colleges, public universities. We also have a sister group that works with affordable housing and public housing, but SEDAC really helps cover all of this public sector here. Brief mention of the Illinois Energy Now incentives. We have some incentive summary sheets that these are on the website as well. So we have electric incentives, and this is really the name of the game. This is the goal of our program, is to push these incentives to save energy, but to help incentivize people to make these changes. So that's where these pots of money are sitting. And an important note is that these pots of money, even though we have blips when there are periods of time when the state budget is frozen, and our program was frozen, but the money wasn't swept. The money was still there. So, for instance, this year we're trying to spend down money from this year and last year's programs. So if you've got projects that are going on right now, projects that were going on last year, it's good to talk about looking into these incentives and tapping into these incentive dollars. That's both through us. We're technical assistants for this program, for the Illinois Energy Now program. They have offices in Springfield as well, but we help field calls and questions and are sort of the first line, and then the checks are written out of Springfield. So T12 to T8 lighting, that's a pretty common one, $7 per fixture, up to $27 per fixture for larger fixtures. T8 to reduce wattage, T8s, that's a possibility if you already have T8s. LED lighting for new fixtures, for instance, there are incentives per watt reduced. Exit signs, LED exit signs. Air conditioning, $35 a ton. HVAC strategies for variable speed drives, $110 per horsepower. Some kitchen retrofits. There's some stuff I chopped off down here as well, some additional kitchen items. Down here at the very bottom, though, custom incentives, 12 cents per kilowatt hour. So if there's something that doesn't fall on this menu list, if there's something that does not fall on this prescriptive list, then it can be a custom calculation, and you would estimate the amount of kilowatt hours saved, and then it's 12 cents per kilowatt hour saved annually. If you're not wanting to make those estimates and those calculations, or if your engineering firm isn't going to do those, that's where SEDAC comes in as well. Our technical assistance, whether it's from one of our reports or from maybe just a specialized measure that we're just helping you do one calculation for an incentive, we can help with all of the above. On the gas side, so we have furnace incentives, boiler incentives, some ovens, some cookers, some kitchen gas use in buildings, all these typical items in buildings that would use gas. If it was a custom incentive, it'd be $2.50 a therm. We do have there's a special program going right now. If you're going to save over 50,000 therms, it would be $3.50. If you're going to save 100,000 therms, it's $4.50. So these are these high-impact natural gas savings programs that they're really targeting big boilers, big districts, big central boiler systems. We're looking for some of these big users and these are big capital projects. I mean, these are very expensive things to do, but we're really trying to help incentivize those projects to go forward. All right, just a brief, this is a sample electric bill. So we have the kilowatt hours here. And we have a total cost of $33,000. We have kilowatt hours of 50,000 kilowatt hours. And we would just do the simple math of what your rate is. So we're talking about 9 cents a kilowatt hour is pretty typical for Illinois. By the way, in California, this would be 20 cents per kilowatt hour. I was in Connecticut, we were at 21 cents per kilowatt hour. So this, if you wonder sometimes why does solar pay back in California but not here right away, it's because it's paying back twice as fast. So some of these efficiency measures pay back a lot faster if you pay a lot more for electricity. That's why we think we need incentive programs to help push these lighting, HVAC, all these things that are saving energy. So the first thing we do in a report is we take 12 months, 24 months, ideally, of gas and electric bills, and we'll talk about that today. Talk about some of the benchmarking that we do, some tips that you guys can use for benchmarking both your buildings or your whole district, and going forth from there. Or these are things that SEDAC can do as well. Just down here, this is the line item that's the efficient. This pays for our programs, energy efficiency programs. Sometimes it's the EDR program. In this case, $300. So 1% of this bill goes towards efficiency. So you guys are all paying into this program. You've already paid for these upgrades. You're paying into these. This is a pot of money. Everybody's chipping in, and the idea is to tap into that when you can. When you're going to make upgrades, tap into this pot of money that's there, and this helps to help pay down the price of these projects when the need arises. We briefly mentioned that we cover the whole state, lots of dots up around Chicago. This represents 1,700 or 1,800 projects throughout the entire state that SEDAC has worked with. There's probably more projects that are on the Illinois Energy that Illinois Energy Now has worked with. Some projects are small incentives, some lighting incentives, maybe a vending miser for a library. Some are very small and some are huge. Some districts are doing entire wings of buildings with new lights. Sometimes entirely new construction or renovation. So some of these incentives are very big dollars. Our website has lots of success stories, examples. We're going to go through some of those today, but a lot of this is off of our website as well. Goals for our clients: save energy dollars, looking for equipment upgrades, identify incentives, and ultimately reduce pollution, reduce carbon footprints. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they like to say that I get rid of smoke. And I say, that's fine. Yeah, I get rid of smoke. That's the point. And the plan here is to get rid of dirty smoke. One of the nice things, efficiency is working. This is a graph that just was updated by the the Energy Information Administration, EIA. And the total U.S. energy use has leveled off since 2000. This top line, this top yellow line, notice it's skirting this 100 quad limit right here. In some years, 2008, 2007, we started poking up above. We started really, the economy was booming. We maybe had a bubble of some sort there. You notice the dip in the recession. But we've recovered pretty well since the recession. But it's interesting how through energy efficiency, we're seeing a much different slope than we had seen in the 90s Maybe the 80s was a little bit of a flat slope, but 60s certainly was a really big increase in energy use. So this is what people are thinking about. This is sort of an economy that's becoming more efficient. We still have manufacturing. We still have high-tech jobs. We still have enormous GDP. There's an interesting version of this graph that compare it to GDP. But really, efficiency is really helping. And this is all sectors. This is not just buildings. This is home, commercial, residential, and transportation sector as well. So this also talks about car efficiency, miles per gallon, things like that. But to me, this is a hopeful slide. You notice this is production here, blue. We are producing a lot more. We're doing a lot of fracking for natural gas, fracking for oil. So our production has certainly gone up. Energy imports have gone down, and we're actually exporting as well, increasing. Interesting national picture. Now to zoom back down to the high school level. So here's a high school we worked with in northern Illinois. This was in 2001. This was 2001 construction. It was pretty standard construction. They had a constant volume system, which is not great. That's one problem they have. They have standard efficiency boilers, which is not great. They could have done better there. But then one year they ran out of money in their energy budget. Here's energy use intensity in the 07 year, 08, and 09. Notice they almost doubled their energy use in this 2009 year. So they ran out of money halfway through this year in their budget. They hit their budget limit, and they gave us a call and they said, for some reason we're out of money in our budget. We didn't realize that we had a problem. We're 6 or 8 months into the year. Now what do we do? So this is energy use per square foot per year. This is one of the metrics that we like to use. So they were at about, let's say, 100, 120. Now they're up at 200 energy per square foot per year. So they've really increased their energy use this year. And then we said the first step would be to look at bills. So we said, let's start with some bill benchmarking. On the top, we have electric. On the bottom, we have gas. And we've plotted this solid line is cooling degree days on the electric and heating degree days on the gas. And notice, let's start with the gas. The gas, we have wintertime gas use. It follows the heating degree days pretty well. We don't have too much use in the summer, which is nice. We have occasional blips, which are a question mark. Likewise, on the electric, we would hope to follow, if this was an office building that was occupied all summer, you'd expect it to follow this electric cooling degree day indication pretty well. In this case, every other year, some years they have summer school, some years they don't have summer school. These 3 lines right here are a question right there. I mean, that is maybe a hint at something going wrong. This is back in 2007. So that's some anomalies, but the thing is, the person that's paying the bills and the person that's maintaining this building are separate in this district. So when there's an occasional month that is double the electric use, they don't really necessarily know. I mean, it might not be until a quarterly report comes or a yearly report comes, or they run out of money. So let's go to the next year. Okay, notice the electric. All of a sudden, things start going crazy. We're way above what you'd expect to use for electricity in December. It's increasing still in June. We're way above our summertime electric use. Likewise on gas. Now we're using gas. We're using 1/3 of the amount of gas in the summer as we were in the winter. So the gas use is really high, and it just continues to be way above the trend of what we'd expect all winter long. Then we worked with this client, and we did quite a lot of retro commissioning, and this is a really great success story. The electric has really calmed down nicely. The gas has calmed down nicely. We're seeing it follow these trends very well. We still do have some sort of shoulder season gas use that's a little bit above what we'd expect for an ideal scenario. So what went wrong in this building? This building had a constant volume system with hot water reheat. The systems had a blip in the programming. Everything stayed on 24 hours a day. That's problem number 1. So fans, air conditioning, heating. Second problem is all of the valves, all of the hot water valves opened to full open. So all of a sudden you have every room getting hot water reheat, which is cooling down. We had and so that's fighting the cooling now. So we have primary cooling getting reheated to the room. Ironically, these rooms weren't terribly uncomfortable. The cooling and the heating were balanced pretty well, and it was producing nice 70-degree air coming out of the boxes. But that's because the air conditioning was fighting the heating to keep up with comfort conditions. Furthermore, the outdoor air louvers got stuck open, so now it's almost as if we have a window in every classroom is just stuck open all year long. Questions?
I've found similar things in my past, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
But I also found, besides software issues, you change an HVAC tech that manages the system. Did you find any of those, or was it purely software and then energy conservation?
Yeah, we have some other cases that are a software glitch that I'll show you as we go along. This one, I think this was a combination of problems, really. I mean, this was sort of a perfect storm of issues. They might have changed a person. I worked with the school, but it's back in 2009, 2010, so I don't remember all the details of exactly the root of the problem. I'll show you one of the cases a little later on where the software has a blip where everything comes on at midnight, and that is, it's actually I think the manufacturer was the same system that we had that problem with, so that could have been related. At the time, I'm not sure if that was exactly the problem in this case. This was actually technically before we had our robust retrocommissioning program. This is one of the case studies that led us to make an argument to have a retrocommissioning program. Most of our projects we work with for, let's say, 2 or 3 months. And we'll go and do a site visit. We'll look at bills. We'll do a site visit. We'll write up a report and hand it to the client. Retrocommissioning projects, we like to work for 18 months. So we'd like to look at the building long term. We'd like to look at these problems long term, and then go back and do a verification after the program is after that initial survey has been complete. Go back and verify savings, and that's sort of what we're seeing in this case. But this one, we did this initial two-month survey and said, hey, we think all these things are a problem. We think you have some sort of retrocommissioning problem, black box problem, but we don't know exactly what it is because we weren't spending 18 months or multiple months on this project. But since then, we have. Because
I understand sometimes you get a new guy who doesn't understand the system, okay?
Yep.
Or you change systems and they haven't gone through training. Then things are running wild just to keep, let's just run it. We got to keep the complaints from coming.
Right.
And that kind of stuff. So that's the reason why I asked that.
Andy?
Right.
And to answer, kind of respond to that also, is we were working with a school district very close to us down in central Illinois. And we had, as all you know, we had a very cold winter a couple of years ago. And they were very concerned about cold air coming into the fresh air vent for unit ventilators and freezing some of the piping in the unit ventilators. And they didn't want to get a call at 3 in the morning saying, hey, you've got water all over the classroom because the pipe busted in the unit ventilator. So they turned the boilers on and the pumps on 24/7 for that week that everything was where it was dirty, that cold snap. Well, they forgot to put the schedules back in. And we started looking at those energy bills many months later, and we're looking at these going, wow, what happened? Because that school district had been doing very well at reducing their energy consumption, and their gas consumption had just kind of gone wild. And that was all, the systems worked fine. Everybody was, but that was an operator error where they had not reinstated the schedules after it got warmer again. And I understand, I would have done the same thing as a building operator. I would have turned those pumps on and the boilers up.
Absolutely. I think probably everybody here has done that. Yeah. But you have to schedule it as on through a certain period of time and then go refer back to the existing schedule.
Yeah, so that was sort of a mistake on the operator side. Something like this happened where we were looking at the bills later, further on down the summer, going, what happened in these months right here? Because it's exactly like what you're seeing right here. When it should have been like this, it was looking like that other one.
Here, now we're going to compare that school's energy use, that's this bad year over here, to all of the other schools that we looked at that are similar schools up to that point in time. So here we are. This is the bad year, 09-010. And we have enormous energy use. The original year was down here around 120 kBtu per square foot per year. And then after everything is fixed, they get back down sort of in the median range at maybe sort of 70 kBtu per square foot per year. So green is gas, blue is electric. So you can kind of see a breakdown of whether it's more gas use or more electric use. You can start picking out interesting trends from this graph. Very small electric use tends to be schools without air conditioning or with very, very minimal air conditioning. So sometimes people say, oh, this isn't fair. You're comparing schools with air conditioning to without. Well, here's the interesting thing. Schools without air conditioning are kind of scattered throughout this graph. So it's not necessarily that schools without air conditioning are the best performing schools we have. Some of these schools over here have an equal amount of gas and electric. Those are air conditioned schools. Occasionally you'll see an all electric school, and that's a geothermal system, for instance. I think that this is number 1. This is number 4. Sometimes people will say, well, I have an old school, so there's just no hope for it. I would counter that with saying we just talked about a 2001 construction school, and it's the worst school on our list. We once sorted this list by age, by approximate age, and it was just a scatter. It wasn't any obvious trend anyway. Number 2, actually this label is wrong, but his second 2 schools on this list, those are both turn of the century schools with window air conditioners, and they did a really good job of fine tuning their systems. And they were kind of a big mass of a building. I will admit that the shape and size of buildings does matter. They were 3-story, big square buildings, so there's less envelope than some of our modern 1950s style buildings that every classroom has windows. So there's some differences there. So the shape and geometry of buildings definitely makes a difference. But it's not just that there's one silver bullet or that a brand new building will necessarily use less energy. And in fact, you have this potential for systems to fight each other. And even in the optimal position here, we're still having reheat. This school is designed to have reheat. So the computer lab right next to the classroom, the computer lab might be getting cooling from the system, and the classroom might be getting reheating because it's perfectly satisfied. Whereas in an older style of construction, we would have put an air conditioner in that computer lab, or opened the windows in that computer lab, or done something different besides having one giant duct of everybody getting air conditioning and everybody getting reheat. So just some different ideas here. Okay. Keep it simple. So in opposition to the large, complicated school, I just wanted to talk about this happens to be a library, but this could have been a small school. This building had a multi-zone system, 8 or 10 zones in this multi-zone system. They retrofit the system to having 8 or 10 small residential furnaces. So each furnace has an air conditioning compressor outside, and each furnace has its own thermostat, wireless thermostat, internet enabled, shows up on their smartphone, and they're able to just say, okay, all these 8 or 10 different rooms, here's the temperature, here's the set point. Each one has its own separate control. In some ways, this is almost like having window units for a school, or each room having its own system. So it's a distributed system, but it's interesting how this really worked well. This library had lost their maintenance person. They didn't have the ability to keep up with the old system. The louvers were falling apart, needing work, and it was heating and cooling at the same time by default anyway. So there's quite a lot of energy savings, $38,000 in energy savings, installed cost $190,000, but this has a 3 or 4 year payback due to the great energy savings in this case. So
and you're using simple payback on that.
This is simple payback, yep.
Would you explain simple payback so everybody understands that?
Sure, yeah. So we have let's talk about costs after incentives, $140,000 because they received $48,000 of incentives. So basically, we're just taking the $37,000 per year of savings divided by the total cost of the project, and so essentially we're saying, and it's 4. So essentially we're saying it's in 4 years you're going to save about $38,000 every year. So 38,000 times 4 gets you to the cost of the system.
As compared to the other payback, which would be estimating that ComEd is going to get more than 9 cents a kilowatt,
right,
et cetera, which makes your simple payback quicker, but that's not the way. The easiest way to do it is just on simple payback.
Simple payback's right, a nice, straightforward, easy way to do it.
That's the one you take to the board, yes.
Yeah, this is the one to take to the board.
You're going to take and pay more. Okay, but we're doing simple payback.
Simple payback, and I don't know. Do you have any comments on simple payback, Robert?
We used to do ROI and IRR, the return on investment, and IRR, internal rate of return. But the simple payback is just so easy to comprehend. And personally, I like it better than the other two. If you're an economist, you probably don't like it because it's so simplified. But it's really easy to kind of wrap your brain around the simple payback.
You can also do, when you're doing that and presenting it to the board, you can also do a comparable. Let's say I've got a 2,000 square foot high house, and I'm going to have a new furnace that's going to change my ratio of what I'm spending and how long it's going to take for me to house. If you use the comparison of a house versus your schools, even though we've got lots of extra zeros on our work, all of a sudden, a lot of times you get the light bulb to kick on.
Right. And so simple payback has really kind of taken over. It's just the easy, simple scenario. We used to pride ourselves on having complex internal rate of return and net present value. We can calculate those still. We can put them in, but all the incentives have to do. So the incentives have some of the incentives have a range of. They want a sort of a sweet spot of 1 to 7 years of simple payback. So if it's any longer than 7 years, they think that that's really too long of an outlook for incentives. And, well, I guess a better way to say that would be, if it's, say, a 10-year payback, the incentive's hoping to buy it down into that 7-year range. If it's less than a 1-year payback, why do you even need an incentive is part of the argument. So that incentive program is really based on this 1 to 7 year payback range. And so we really tried to align our reports with the incentive program as well to make it simpler. Just a little bit more information. So this is an energy cost breakdown that we worked on one of our more advanced reports. I think these are numbers from that previous example. But one of the things that I think is interesting, so we have, where's the energy being used in the building? So cooling is about 17%, so $30,000 for cooling. Lighting, and it's interesting how lighting is equivalent to the amount of cooling. So lights in the building really do use a lot of electricity. This is a big portion of your budget. Water heating, we're not even going to care about this 3% water heating. Don't even worry about it. I will admit we once had a school that had installed their valves backwards, their mixing valves backwards, and whenever they flushed a toilet, they were steaming. I mean, that's a problem. So yes, if you see steaming toilets, maybe fix that. But kitchen, there's good things to do in a kitchen, but it's overall not very big. Fans and pumps sometimes can be a lot bigger. Sometimes that can be twice as big than in this case. And but heating, so heating's a big portion. 45% of their bill is gas in this building. Now, what we wanted to do is break it down. How much was due to the walls and windows and roof? How much is due to the reheat? How much is due to the ventilation? And so what we did was we just did a simple model of this building. On bigger projects, we might do that. And I turned the ventilation to 0. So if you got no fresh air in the building, what would be the result? And it saved 17%. And then I did a scenario where I turned off the reheat. Or I think I changed the system to be sort of more of a split system instead of a central reheat system. And that's what the cost of having reheat was in this building. And it's just interesting to see that the envelope, the windows and the walls in a commercial building don't matter as much as you might think. In a house, yes, they matter a lot. You don't have a whole lot going on inside your house. It's almost all windows and walls. But in a commercial building, all these other things really, lights are adding up. The plug loads are adding up, the fans are adding up, the ventilation and the reheat that we do. We don't even do ventilation in the house. That would be infiltration, I guess. But so it's just really interesting to see how much is due to the envelope here. So it's not as bad as you might think. So this is another argument for making sure your HVAC systems are tuned up, make sure your lighting systems are tuned up, just thinking to yourself, what's using energy in my building? Portfolio manager, I threw this in here. Sometimes questions come up about the Energy Star Portfolio Manager. This can be a useful tool if you have a large district of buildings and if you want to try to keep track of your large group of buildings. My example is not great because I do, some of these are banks, some of these are high schools, and I really only usually work with a client for 1 year's worth of data or 2 years worth of data. So this graph, I think this graph represents that I had worked with a bunch of projects in 2011. And I don't have as many projects updated in 2015. So it looks like I've saved quite a lot of money in my portfolio of buildings, quite a lot of energy. So that makes me feel good, but I think that's just because I need to update these banks and things I haven't worked with in a long time. We used to do private sector programs as well. Now we're strictly public. But it can give you sort of a graphical representation of what your aggregation of buildings are using for energy. These are all energy per square foot when you start drilling down into these. So if you had added an addition, then you have to add a little thing in the web form for I've added this many square feet, recalculate your values per square foot. It is a little complicated sometimes. There's some details. The devil's in the details. How many refrigerators you're using, you have to make an estimate of that. How many computers you're using, make an estimate of that. This is a metric that can, it's not infallible, but it's a good way to kind of, over time, see how you're doing and maybe compare yourself to to other clients. Just for instance, with a comparison question, down here, this is the Energy Star target finder value that we'd expect that Energy Star was hoping the school could be at about 60 kBTU. I would say if we look back at our comparison to other schools, 60 kBTU, that'd be an Energy Star target school, and that's the 75. Energy Star is defined as the 75th percentile, so you're better than 75% of all your other schools. So I would say that that's about what our data shows too. If you were at 60, you'd be doing pretty darn well, and you'd be in the top tier of your peers. This tool can also help you target that energy used per square foot, and getting towards that 60 in this case. This is also useful. You can add multiple people to these accounts. With anything, there's some hiccups. I will admit that sometimes I've tried to do the auto data upload from my Excel file to here.
It's not that easy.
It's not that easy. You're almost better off just having, sitting down while you watch a baseball game and just type in the values over the course of half an hour, type them in manually. There's only 12 or 24 values basically to get started. And then once you keep up with it monthly or quarterly, then you can really kind of see this. And this is the kind of thing that can get shared amongst people in your district.
How do we get that? Do we have to go through the SEDAC program, or is that something?
This Energy Star Portfolio Manager is something you can do on your own. I think probably almost everybody's already doing Excel spreadsheets of where they are. The advantage of putting your Excel spreadsheets on here as well is just because you can then share it. You can share it with your district, share it with other people in your district, with the business office. It's a way to kind of keep everybody accountable for what's going on with energy in your buildings. This Energy Star corrects for weather. It's weather-corrected information as well from year to year. So if you have a terrible winter, it should be able to take that into account as well. We've had some projects where we've encouraged people to use this and help them get going on this, but generally we have a nice Excel form that we like to use that gives us a nice representation that we can put in our report. Some of these graphs don't copy and paste to our report so well, so we just tend to use our own Excel.
You just go to the Energy Star website and you can sign up for this. It's a free program.
Right. But we do. Robert's working with a couple of districts right now that have given us a whole portfolio of buildings.
Yeah, like Andy said, we're working with a few districts, and they gave us all the energy use for all their buildings. And what we're doing is we're not going to look at every building. What we did was we did this metric that Andy mentioned here, this kBTUs per square foot per year. How much energy does your building use per square foot per year? Common metric. And so we rank all these buildings in these districts and see which are the biggest users. And those are the schools we're going to target first. Most likely, there might be some other instances where the superintendent says, no, I want to look at this number 5 or 6, and we'll say, that's fine. So we'll look at that one too. The one district that we're looking at right now, at the very top of the list, is a brand new school. It's at 97 kBTUs per square foot per year, and it's a geo school. It's 2007, I think. To me, that's a brand new building, basically. And it's their highest user, so we're going to take a look at that and a couple of other old schools. But that's how we rank the buildings. It's using that metric, the kBTUs per square foot per year.
Yep. Do you guys factor in when you look at these true comparatives to the heating and cooling degree phase?
That's what this one does.
Yeah, certainly. This takes into account weather patterns, heating and cooling degree days. That's where these we try to plot heating and cooling degree days monthly for that reason, and compare them. We also like, for that reason though, we like to have a couple years worth of data so that we're not just getting one winter that's throwing everything off. But we like to get some average numbers to try to not bias everything by just one bad winter. So we've just talked about all this. Actual utility bill, more bills are better than fewer. Changes in weather can be highlighted, but changes in equipment or equipment that's stuck on can be highlighted. And it's preparation for our site visit. Just really briefly going through how we do it. So this is cooling degree days plotted with electricity for a school. There's no summer school, so they're really not cool. So you don't see much of an increase in the summer. The question is this the right representation to show? But we'd actually like to show there is no cooling being used in the school. So what we're going to do is we're going to offset this axis up. So now we're showing there's missing cooling. I think that's a better representation of what the energy is being used for in this building. And the question is, do we want to put it, we sort of arbitrarily put it up here at 22,000? Is this an appropriate value? Maybe we'll even raise it up a little bit. So now we're looking at the spring month where we're probably not using any cooling in April. We're probably not using, question is, why did we have more heating over here? Maybe the lights are on longer hours of operation. Maybe some more pumps and fans are running in full heating mode versus shoulder season. So the idea is that we're picking a season where we're not running cooling, we're not running heating to try to represent this. And notice we kind of get some kind of interesting trends frequently. We frequently do pick up this sort of cooling for part of the building. Part of that month of May is probably in cooling mode. So that's interesting. We tend to see those. Those are nice. So April was the reasonable guess. You could plot heating degree days on here and do the same sort of thing, but it gets a little bit messy once you start plotting too many things on there. But we are seeing this blip from whether it's space heaters, whether it's lighting, whether it's more HVAC use. I will say sometimes with space heaters, one of the recommendations I like to give is if I go into buildings or districts or offices and I see people with space heaters, I try to be sympathetic. That person probably has a space heater because there's a comfort problem, whether it's an absolute comfort problem or that person's just chilly, and both of those are valid. One of the things I like to recommend is instead of a 1,500 watt space heater, on my desk I have a 1960s metal desk, and I keep a blue hot pad sitting on my desk for my armrest. So as I'm typing, I've got this nice warm hot pad on my desk that's kind of keeping my arms warm, keeping my mouse hand warm, and sort of radiating heat to the space by using the desk as a radiator, essentially. And so that's a 50 watt electric heating pad compared to a 1,500 watt space heater, and it keeps me pretty nice and toasty. So I like to recommend that. Whether it's for fire reasons to get rid of those big loads, it's not going to catch a fire. It turns off automatically after 2 hours. I have to sometimes remember to turn it back on. I have a colleague who keeps one of those on her back or on her lap. So it's just interesting things to think about. My wife has one in her office on the floor. They make foot pad versions. So it was a $40 solution that saves the space heater probably uses $100 a year in electricity, and this uses $5 a year in electricity. So keeping your feet warm is also an important thing. So that's just something I like to suggest to that as a policy, getting rid of space heaters is a frequent policy, but maybe what to replace them with is sort of what's missing in that policy.
To politically battle she's got one on her desk or underneath her desk, and I want the one that blows on my legs underneath my desk, and then the insurance company doesn't want any.
Yeah. So I would push back by just saying, what if we have very, very low wattage heating pads in comparison, and what's the danger of those? So that's just the thing just one of those things to try to experiment with. On gas, so this is natural gas usage. In this case, the question is, do we want to do the same offset like we did before? Is this value under this curve the gas use for the winter? And I would say no, because what's all this winter gas use down here? So what we would like to do is actually offset it very minimally for what's the domestic hot water use. So it's probably only using, 100, 300 therms a month for domestic hot water, some very small value. And now what we've done is now this illustrates the area above the curve in the summertime is now illustrated as the problem area that we'd like to try to reduce reheat. So this is likely excessive reheat going on. Look at the magnitude of reheat of gas use in the summer versus winter. So reducing this reheat is the goal in this case, and this kind of helps to illustrate. And quantitatively, you can go in and add up these bars and make a pie chart, or quantitatively say how many dollars you're wasting on reheat, on excessive reheat. Sometimes it's electric hourly data now. Now that we have smarter meters, you can get from ComEd, you can ask for your hourly data. I think it costs like $3 to get a download of a year of hourly data, somewhere between 3 and 9. And this is a kind of cool thing that you can plot. I think ComEd's starting to offer some of these tools online now. So if anybody's worked with some of the Energy Insights online or the business tools online that ComEd has, I'd be curious to talk with you more. I don't have any graphs right now from those, but we put these into Excel and we plotted a whole month on top of itself. So there's every day in the month, starting at midnight, going through all the 24 hours in a day. And you can see right away where the weekend days are in this plot. You can start to pick out what the trends are in the morning. The HVAC comes on, and what are we talking, 7 o'clock in the morning? So between 7 and 8, all these systems are turning on, lighting, HVAC. And then at about 3 o'clock, we start turning systems off. And then the rate at which these systems turn off is one of these things that we try to fine tune in districts when we look at these more detailed analysis. So we try to say, well, are you leaving lights on in classrooms and the janitor's turning them off as they go? Are they keeping those? Are they using the lights as a tool to remember where they cleaned? And it's nice to be able to make sure you have clean rooms, but the question is, how much is that costing you? So it could have a policy of just turning the lights off or having occupancy sensors, vacancy sensors in those rooms. The lights would turn off automatically, and then maybe there's some other policy about putting the trash can outside the room or something, or some sort of way to have janitors know that they've cleaned these rooms properly. It's kind of interesting. This shows Tuesday, November 2nd was voting day, so they had part of the school was mostly closed, but part of the school was used in this case for voting. And then it's interesting to see what happens when you run a late program on a Monday night. They probably didn't need to use this much electricity for the whole school, but I think they just left everything on and let it go. And one night of the year, that's probably fine, but the trick is to look for trends where this is happening frequently, multiple nights per month. Election day. Really briefly, this is from a retro commissioning project. This graph illustrates sort of what that nighttime load is from fans and pumps, and maybe night lights and lighting that's on at night as well. But I don't have a great explanation for why sometimes it's 125 kW, and then during this month of January, some of the days it jumped up to 150 kW. So there's interesting right there. There's some sort of 25 kW of change halfway through January. So maybe the heating pumps didn't run part of the month, and then did run, maybe additional pumps were running later in the month. So it's kind of, you start to tease out interesting trends from this data. When staff arrives, notice there's this little delay then when the rest of the lights are on in the building. And again, there's this question about cleaning. Why are we running the systems till 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night in some cases versus 6 o'clock at night in some cases? And then this is all questionable energy, and we would total up to how much energy that is to try to argue for energy savings there. One last graph of this style. This is a spring break where we did an experiment with this district. So we said the blue was before spring break, and the green are days that are weekends, Saturday and Sunday on either side of spring break. Then the red is our spring break days. Now normally the blue ran all the way out here to 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And so they've reduced quite a lot of their electricity use during the day, but the HVAC was still running until late at night for the custodial crews. And we said, well, wait a second, the building's not going to get cold instantly, especially in spring, and it's not going to heat up instantly in summer. Yet the building has a lot of mass. Its temperature can ride pretty well. So let's talk about shutting everything off earlier in the day. So this spring break was used as test. In this week, we saved $250, and that's $13,000 per year in fan electricity alone from shutting this HVAC system down. So that doesn't even this test doesn't even go into the savings from air conditioning times and heating times by reduced run times of these systems. Commissioning. So we've been talking a lot about commissioning as we go. I'll skip through some of these. Ongoing commissioning. I will mention ongoing commissioning. That school that we looked at earlier that had that great success story and saved all that energy, what's to say that that isn't going to just go crazy and haywire again? So if people aren't staying on it, and it's not just the maintenance manager that has to stay on this. I mean, it's really everyone in the building. People are paying the bills. People who are looking at these systems. Who's to say that these systems aren't coming on at midnight? That's been the problem that we've seen. So we know one of our former employees now works for a company that goes, and he is the person for the district, and he works nights, weekends, and holidays. His normal hours are when everything should be off, and he walks the buildings, and he walks a building a night, and he checks these systems. He goes in, he starts work at Friday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He touches base with teachers as they're leaving. He commends the ones that are turning their lights off already. He reminds the ones that aren't turning their lights off already. He's that extra pair of eyes and ears to turn those systems off that we were looking at those last graphs. And he's also the person that looks at dampers, valves, VFDs, boilers. If the boiler's running into the spring, that might cost $50,000 for several extra months of boiler use. And so he's paid for his salary right there.
This month.
What's that?
Look at this month.
Right.
We're running air conditioning now.
Right. So really fine-tuning these systems is key. And I would argue that this goes beyond what normal maintenance has the capability of doing, just hours in a day. That this really is an additional whether you call it ongoing commissioning or commissioning agent. There could be different terms for this, or a maintenance-based energy champion. But there's potential for 10 to 25% savings. My friend was with that district for about a year, and in his first year, he had 13% savings, and he was hoping to get to that 20 or 25% number. Retro-commissioning, we've talked a lot about retro-commissioning. Sometimes we'll do reports where we'll show that VAV damper is stuck on for 100% for multiple days here. Supply fan is the blue line. Outdoor air damper is stuck at 40% all the time. So right off, the 100% stuck on, the 40% stuck on are indicators right there. Furthermore, when you dig deeper into this, the reheat coil is the blue line. For some reason, the reheat coil is running hot at night and cold during the day. And this had a backwards, this had a 0-1 problem in its programming. And the VAV boxes were staying open. The night set points were the same as the day set points, and it was running excessively through the night. So this system was confused. The occupancy schedule was backwards for this VAV damper in one classroom.
So was this a people problem or a sensor software problem?
I'm not sure if the wires of the sensor were plugged in backwards, if the red and the white were flipped, or if it was a purely programming error, but it's likely
It's obvious that it's wrong.
It's wrong. And either way...
I'm curious as to how did it get there? Physically? Or did somebody understand?
These systems are complicated. There's complicated code, and digging into that code, and we crash satellites into Mars because we miss our 1 or a 0 or a negative sign, and luckily this is just a classroom in a building. But keeping on top of whether these, so this is where you need to have a person go and stick their hand next to that VAV valve or that coil and say, hey, it's nighttime, why is this coil hot?
We've also run into instances where the building automation system is not working properly. We had a school district down south, and they had a fairly new school that had 16 RTUs on top of the school. And we looked at some of the energy consumption in detail. And these systems shut off at 6 in the evening. I take it back, at 10 in the evening. And then promptly turned right back on at midnight. And that was 16 RTUs. And that turned out to be a BAS problem, a building automation system problem. It was, and if you looked at it on the screen, the schedule showed that it was off till 6 in the morning. But it turned on. Our data showed that it turned on at midnight. So that was a glitch in the software. And no one really knew that because, well, everything's comfortable. They come in the morning, it's comfortable. It's comfortable at 3 in the morning too. So and that was, I think, we estimated that was about $40,000 a year in extra energy consumption and wear and tear on the equipment also.
And I got a side note to that.
Yeah.
It would be easy enough if you ever, for most of us, I think, have these systems to check. But if you go to your history and your discharge error, you don't need too sophisticated. You can just look at whether that's dropping off from 10 at night to 4 in the morning. If it's not,
right.
No.
And the key word there is to have a history. And the other question is, how long does history go back? Is it a 4-hour history? Is it a 1-day history? We're getting modern systems and modern computers.
But then it comes to your ways.
Yep.
Then it comes over to guys like you that come in and do all that. But I mean, just for ordinary operations, if you ever tried to just check yourself, how's my system working?
Right.
Well, I seem to be running higher. Like, for example, the energy bills go through my office. So I kind of see that.
Yep.
So if all of a sudden I saw a spike, it would make me wonder what was wrong. But
Good.
I'm just saying, as a course of while you're watching the ball game,
Right.
I don't know who has time for it, but I'm just saying, it's something, if you are suspicious of it, it's an easy way to find it.
Well, the question, so I would clarify, is so I think everybody in the room probably has a building automation system. So most clients that we go to nowadays have a building automation system. The next question to ask is, do you have a building automation system that has historic trend data? I would say maybe 50-50 on that one.
Really?
But that should be a minimal 100%, period.
We really
It
need
should be a base core
Right.
of your BAS system.
But when you spec a system, what are the things that are easy to leave out?
And you still have to set up the trend.
You still have to set up the trend, yep.
You may have the trending capability, but did you set up a trend on this unit or
Yep.
the whole building or what? We realize it eats up a lot of data. So do you have it run for a
Right.
week and then it washes away?
Right.
Do you have it print out every morning?
Right. Right. These are all.
Waste of paper.
No, well, I'd rather kill the paper than kill the.
I agree.
BTUs
And you know, now we are.
kilowatts.
I pay $5 a month for my laptop to back up every night at home to some cloud backup service that doesn't really care how much data I use. I would argue that in the future we're going to start having this ability to really just back it up somewhere offsite even, and not worry as much about are we filling out the trends. But some of these systems, 10-year-old systems, 15-year-old systems, if you run too big of a trend, you can crash the subpanel. So I'm always careful of that when I'm going to a site visit and asking, can we set up a trend for this? And you have to be careful not to set up a 1-second trend or a trend on change of value that would crash it in 5 minutes. And, right.
2 hours, 4 hours, that should be a good one.
And I would argue to experiment with it, right? So try a couple-day trend and learn about your system enough to know what your capabilities are and how far back you can go. I think those are all good. Okay, so let's just some images of equipment here. I think you guys all know, we're not going to harp on equipment too much, but whether it's rooftop units, boilers, motors with VFDs, lighting, I think probably everybody in the room are doing these things. Our top 10 strategies, lighting is sort of the low-hanging fruit, plug loads, making sure your computers are off, the computers are going to sleep. We don't need screensavers. I mean, really a screensaver in modern day is completely useless with modern monitors. They don't get burned in. That's really a screensaver should just have dollar signs on the screen. It's wasting probably $45 a year per screen that's on. Multiply that times how many computers are probably in your schools. Ventilation, whether you're leaving the windows open all night long, whether the louvers are stuck open. Are you doing heat recovery on that? If you're a 24/7 operation, you definitely want to do heat recovery. If you're normal operating hours, it's maybe harder to argue based on our cost of electricity for heat recovery. But new construction, these are things we should look at in new buildings and deep retrofits. Heating and cooling, condensing boilers, better chillers. That being said, Northern Illinois doesn't have as big of a cooling load as Southern Illinois, as the Southern United States. So you have to think about where your energy is being used, and that's where we look at that pie chart to try to identify energy use and where to spend the money. Motors and pumps, talk about VFDs, building automation we've talked about commissioning. And then we start getting into even more expensive things. Air sealing, we have some examples of that coming up. That is doable, but it's tricky. It's harder than just you have to get up in the ceiling. You have to stick your head up there. You have to maybe when you're doing a retrofit of a ceiling is when you would look at air sealing. But insulation and windows, you're not going to be changing the walls or the windows of your building until you're doing a gut rehab. And even then, we've talked about the energy payback of an internally load dominated building, and those walls and windows aren't as much money as you might expect. Extra credit, we talk about renewables as extra credit, putting solar on the roof, for instance. That's becoming much more common. You might see a lot of wind turbines out in fields. You probably don't want a wind turbine in your field because you should recognize that even if it's a small wind turbine, a farmer having a small wind turbine is one thing. He has a tractor. He has all his spare time. He knows how to change oil on his tractor. He knows how to pull things down off of tall poles. Do we have a time in a year to once a year be changing the oil on a tall pole? I would say that you don't. The worst thing you could have happen is have a nice looking lawn ornament that's stuck on a windy day and a big advertisement. Hey, we aren't keeping this maintained. So that's just the caveat to watch out for. Small wind. It's doable. It's possible, but large wind is much more economically feasible. Putting solar on the roof though is kind of boring in comparison, but it's boring because nothing ever breaks too. This is one of our colleagues. She put solar on her church roof. She got a grant to do that. This is the bus garage in Champaign, Urbana, and they put 300 kilowatts of solar on that. So these are coming up. Power purchase agreements are just starting. My church is working with a power purchase agreement. We might be one of the first in the state. There are a couple municipalities that are looking at doing, so essentially leasing solar, and they're looking at doing a zero down 20-year agreement for that electricity, and they're getting a below market rate for that electricity over a 20-year period. So there's ways to do agreements to look at this. These have been happening on the East Coast and West Coast. We're just starting to see those happen in Illinois. A lot of schools probably have a 1 or 2 kilowatt solar system from Illinois Clean Energy Association. I highly recommend. That's a demonstration scale. Science classes can use the data from that. You can point at it on the side of the building. A lot of schools, I think Illinois is number 3 in the country with schools with solar. They're very tiny solar systems, but it's still a good thing to have for students and going forward. A couple case studies. We have elementary school. What they did, they replaced the existing boiler and the chiller. They put in nice new windows. They had single pane 1940s, 50s windows. They retrofit lighting. They put in occupancy sensors. They did air sealing. I have a picture of the air sealing on the next slide. They are saving about $17,000 a year. They got $30,000 in DCEO incentives in Illinois Energy Now money. And the total project cost pays back in about 6.5 years. That's really fast for putting in new windows, which are incredibly expensive. And they put in some big boiler and chiller systems as well. Those were running very poorly before. The air sealing in this case really helps pay down this project. This project. Here's the picture of the pre-retrofit air sealing. You can't actually see daylight here. We've had some clients that stick their head up in the ceiling tile and they literally see daylight coming in along that wall-roof interface. But they've sprayed spray foam in here. There was a little bit of a circuitous route there, but there was an open path for air, for mice, crickets. I mean, just think of all the things that you don't want in your building. And so sticking your head above a ceiling tile in a classroom is something that's really interesting to do. Especially in different constructions of wings. And then new construction's not immune to this either. Who's to say that the contractor that built the wall and the contractor that built the roof coordinated and made sure that the contractor that put the insulation in between the two did their job? So that's just something to watch out for, even in new construction as well. But nice spray foam on this rehab. One thing I'll say also about envelopes. So we talked about it's hard to pay back insulation, windows and insulation on projects. In this building, this was a new construction building. The occupants complained about being cold. We went with our infrared camera on a chilly day. It was maybe 40 degrees outside, so it wasn't even as cold as it could have been. Notice this is 64 degrees is the dark blue, 75 degrees is the white. So this is a wall. You can see the metal studs in this wall. This is a wall that this was a newish construction, and they were in a rural area, and their designer thought, well, they don't enforce the energy codes here. Why should we put continuous insulation on these walls? I mean, that is illegal for the designer to not use the energy code, first off. But furthermore, it makes the occupants uncomfortable. So 20% of this wall now, if you added all these blue studs up, 20% of this wall has basically no insulation. It has metal studs, metal radiators to the outside. That just bleed heat, and it feels cold to the person that's sitting next to this. Now here's a picture of the window, and notice the cold frame on this window. Similar, 40 degrees. This must have been a little colder day, so it must have been near zero outside probably. But this corner is 40 degrees. You're going to get frost on this window. You're below the dew point. You're going to start condensing water. Any too much colder, you're going to start freezing on these corners of these windows. These were windows with aluminum frames that should have been thermally broken, but they weren't. And this is just, again, radiating heat to the outside, and it's an uncomfortable situation. This window pane is not bad. This double pane windows, that's great. Excellent double pane windows, but you really need thermally broken as well. This is probably not ever going to get changed in this building. This is a pretty new building, pretty new construction. They're going to live with this forever. And I would argue that an older style of construction wouldn't have had this problem even. They wouldn't have had metal studs in these walls. And they would have built a nice mass wall, and it probably would have done a better job at insulating this building.
I went on this site visit, and they were complaining about having frost on the sill on the inside. And that's how bad it was.
Right.
And it was a brand new building.
This is a case study in the same district as the previous one. Now, this building, they did geothermal. They did not have cooling to begin with. So they had to add a cooling system regardless. And they said, well, if we're going to add a whole bunch of new system to this building, let's go with a Cadillac system. Let's go with a long-term solution. They did similar new windows, similar lighting, similar sensors for the lighting, air sealing as well. I think I need to update this. These numbers have been since they've done their air sealing, I think. And in this case, it's a very expensive initial project, admittedly. being low on my battery car. It is very expensive, $500,000 project. They received good incentives. They also received some other incentives from some other groups as well to help pay down some of those. I'm going to plug it in. But this is a 29-year payback. And notice the difference between systems. I mean, this is just a long-term payback system. Geothermal is a longer-term payback, but public sector buildings, they're going to be there for the long term. So we would argue that this is still a very valid thing to do in the long term. Now, figuring out which one I'm going to unplug. Robert, do you have any other comments on this one? I want to find my plug.
Well, you know, like Andy said, these buildings are here to stay, most of them. So the investment is going to pay back over time. A lot of times these districts will package this, say this building with another building, and that last one that Andy showed you, that other school that was retrofit, that'll bring this payback down quite a bit if you package it with several other projects. But like Andy said, this school didn't have air conditioning, and they wanted air conditioning, so that's what really drove the costs up.
Have you guys worked with any geothermal plants that have been in operation for over 10 years?
I can think of some that have been 5,
I mean, it's
5 or
all
6
relatively
or
new.
7.
Case studies on stuff that's been around 10 years.
It's been around for a long time.
So,
Yeah, I'm thinking Bloomington Schools did geothermal quite a while ago, and that might be in the 10-year range. I know I've worked with some buildings that have 15-year-old water source heat pump systems. So we worked with an office building that had a server farm on one floor, and that server farm heats the rest of the building with a water source heat pump loop. I will say at 15 years, some of their heat pumps, some of their compressors were needing to be replaced.
Your batteries are about to go out, it says right there.
Yeah, I did plug it in, so. I can double check that it's plugged in. Why is it saying it's not? There we go. All right, we're running with juice now. All right, so looking at large boilers, so we've got different scales of different projects. So this is a 1960s building, steam unit, had a new boiler. They put in new oxygen sensor and air and fuel controls on this. So they probably increased their efficiency by 2%. The question is, what is the efficiency of the overall system? It might be 60% efficient, sort of, for the system, for an old steam system that's bleeding off steam in different areas. Some of the steam traps might be bleeding off steam. How much steam is being vented to the air? How much steam is being vented at each of the condensate pumps? So those are all things to watch out for. So options for this school, boiler tune-up, which is essentially what they've pretty much already done, but this is a 5-year-old system. They should tune it up every couple of years, if not every year, especially for such a big one.
Is there still a boiler tune-up funding?
There's boiler tune-up program, yes. So we have a boiler tune-up program. The ERC at UIC, at University of Illinois Chicago, helps run this boiler tune-up program as part of our program. So they will come, it's at every 2 years, perhaps 18 months or 2 years. You can get this subsidized boiler tune-up program.
And I understand now you can pick out your HVAC company where in the past you had selected vendors.
Okay, yep, that might
You
be.
use the vendor that you have typically used in the past or somebody else that Tim recommends and you're happy with.
Right. And I think that there's a stipulation you can't do it every single year, but I know plenty of clients that find value in doing it every year anyways. If you have a big enough system that needs to be tuned up.
Well, I don't hear anybody complaining about it. I do hear people saying, are you sure, etc. So, yes, there's money out there to do
Right.
HVAC tune-up.
Yep, and boiler tune-ups is its own separate program all in itself, exactly. And we talk about, this is along with the boiler program, there's this high-impact natural gas. We mentioned this a little bit. So if you're in this range to, if you're going to change a boiler, if you're going to really do a major steam retrofit to your system, for instance, or maybe a lot of your steam traps have failed, and that steam program can help identify those, you might be in this category of saving 50,000 therms and getting, $1 more per therm savings, or even $4.50 per therm savings. I think, boiler tune-up, new boilers is another option. A big question in a steam system they already are converting, all their new wings of this high school are converted to hot water already, so they're already going to hot water. the number of areas of the school that really still use steam are fewer and fewer now. So the question is, when putting in a giant new boiler, are you going to put in a 75% efficient steam boiler, or can you go to a 95% efficient hot water boiler and get rid of those other efficiencies of the system as well by upgrading the unit ventilators in the rest of the building, or I think there were some hallways that still had steam radiators in them. High impact incentives are available. Boiler tune-up, some example projects here. Bald Chatham School District, they tuned up 23 boilers in this district. $45,000 to do that. $40,000 of incentives. So it's only costing them $6,000 for this big tune-up project, and they're saving $7,000 a year estimated savings. So this is a 0.9 payback after all these incentives. Hillsborough is pipe insulation. Pipe insulation is part of this tune-up program. So they repaired 2,000 feet of pipe, $25,000 to do that. They received $19,000 of incentives. They're saving $3,000 a year, so 2-year payback on this. One interesting point to mention, these damaged steam pipes were going through the gymnasium and the library as well. So this all of a sudden raised this question of a life safety issue as well with these exposed steam pipes, or these not very well insulated steam pipes anymore. So there's also ways to tap into other funds on some of these projects.
So that pipe insulation rebate, that only covers the insulation and new stuff. It doesn't cover any abatement costs?
I think there are, and I think that it does get tricky if you start talking about asbestos.
Yeah.
Right. And even in that, so, that's another thing I forgot to mention in that geothermal example. They were getting rid of asbestos in that example by retrofitting all those old pipes, or getting rid of those old pipes. I wonder if they could have left them in place, less money, but they wanted to get rid of the asbestos too. I mean, that was part of the program. So yes, those add costs. Certainly there's questions that come up with any project is in the details.
But this pipe insulation, his question is, if it's already insulated, there's going to be no rebate, right? Because
if it's already insulated, if the insulation is damaged, it's possible. I think there are ways to encapsulate the damaged insulation. I think there are possibilities, but that's, specifics. Yeah, you have to talk to the ERC for specifics on those.
Do the abatement first, and then you apply for the incentive.
Because you have to replace the insulation anyway.
Yeah.
So, right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When was this one done in Bald Chatham?
In the last couple of years. This was a recent. We were off for a year, but it was probably the year before that. So 2014 maybe.
Well, the director of building grounds is retired. I'm going to send him a picture.
Oh yeah. Oh good. We included this in our. We worked with them on projects. This was included in our newsletter a couple of years ago. New boiler example. Here's a 20,000 square foot building. It's a little smaller, but they had this, boiler the size of a small VW bus or something like that. And it originally had it was converted to natural gas from a coal hopper from the factory. So at least it wasn't coal to begin with, but it was it was an add-on conversion to go from coal to natural gas in this 1940s and 1930s boiler. So it got cut up in place. There's some cost in doing this, but these guys had a lot of fun doing that too. The boiler that got put in place is probably the size of a small refrigerator. It's smaller than my home refrigerator. So all of a sudden we get this whole room now of space in this building. Put in a new window. There used to be a giant louver for the boiler, so this room now has a window as an added benefit. The black lines here show the energy savings, the gas savings, and it adds up to about $2,000 of gas savings in this year. So lots of advantages in this system. Interestingly, this was a 94% condensing boiler. For some reason, it didn't quite qualify for a 95% efficient incentive in this case. It was a sort of a funny loophole detail. Every other boiler in its line, this was the top of the largest of the four in the line. All the other three were rated 96% efficient. This one was 94 for some reason. So I don't know if it's actually a problem. If there's a reason for that, just because of its size. So there was one of those funny details where we were hoping for this $800 incentive as we were going, and then it just didn't quite work out in the end. So again, sometimes these little details are a little complicated. Here's an example of the church going solar. This is the same building. So looking at putting solar on the roof, it's going to be on these racks. We actually signed the papers yesterday. And power purchase agreement, it'll be 70% of their electric use, $2,500 a year. And part of it is through raising money, part of it is through federal tax credits, through this investment corporation, and then part of it's through selling renewable energy credits. We're also seeing wastewater treatment plants. We're seeing some other municipal clients that are looking at doing these in the coming years. So it's just one of those things to keep an open eye on. I'm curious to see if we see this happening in the future. A lot of this had to do with this renewable energy credit sale. The state of Illinois administered this through the Commerce Commission. It'll be interesting to see if that happens in years going forward as well. That's part of, I paid for a third of this project. Hybrid boilers, another option is if you have a modern boiler already, relatively recent conventional boiler already, you can put in an additional condensing boiler in the system that runs for all the part load hours of the year in condensing mode. This condensing boiler actually doesn't, at peak load, it doesn't actually run at peak efficiency. These condensing boilers will run maybe 80 or 83% efficient when you're really cranking, really putting as much heat out as possible. And to be at condensing mode, they really want to have maybe 80-degree return water temperature. So they would like to have cool water temperature, which is doable on cooler days when you have very low loads in your building. Although you have to be careful and you have to engineer your system to be able to do that too. So it's not just a plug and play. You can't just stick these boilers in your building without re-engineering the VFD and the water flow temperature on these systems. You really want to optimize to be in the optimal efficiency zone. But doing a hybrid system is one of these possibilities for buildings that already have pretty good equipment and could possibly take advantage. And you might be getting 70% of the efficiency increase for quite a lot less cost instead of replacing all of your old boilers. So that's another possibility that we see sometimes. Steam traps, we talked a little about steam trap maintenance. Here's a steam trap and an infrared camera, so you see the hotter side and the slightly cooler side. There's also, in this program, they're looking at it with they're listening to it with an ultrasonic steam trap sensor that you listen to. And that's pretty much it for heating systems. A brief mention about gym lighting. Certainly going in classrooms, going from T12 to T8 is important to get a good energy savings. I think everybody's pretty much on board with those savings already. That's the low-hanging fruit. Gyms going from metal halide to T8. A big advantage of restrike time. They turn on instantly. You can turn them off. You can turn them on. You can turn on banks. You can turn them off at lunch. If you have a nice day and everybody's going outside, you can turn them all off. You don't have to wait 15 minutes for them to restart. More efficient overall in general anyways. We're seeing some people starting to look at LED for these, but really interior LED is not much more efficient than the 4-foot fluorescent, especially in small situations where you don't really get that much of a beam spread out of the LED. It's a little bit questionable whether the costs will come down in the future. Maybe the cost will come down a lot in the future and it'll be worth that little incremental savings above a T8 lamp. But right now T8s are very cheap and they're already pretty efficient. So it's hard to beat that for interior. Exterior, I think we have exterior next. Oh, well, here's an example of some solar tubes in a renovation or a new wing of a building. So they have 50-foot candles when the lights are on, 1-foot candle when the solar tubes are open, which looks really dark in this picture, but you can walk in there just fine. You get some light from these solar tubes. Oh, I'm sorry, that's solar tubes off, and you get 6-foot candles. Okay, so enough to see by when the solar tubes are open. These actually have a louver in the solar tube. So it's kind of an interesting way to keep lighting. This is an art classroom, and the art teacher really liked having that natural light in their room as well, and in the ability to turn off some of the lights. Hallways. In this case, every other light in this hallway is off. I would argue you could probably go with every 5th light being on or even less. Hallways for passing periods really don't need to have that much, or maybe this is the nighttime. So sometimes we go into hallways. If this was the nighttime hallway use, 50% on lights on in the hall, we would say, well, that's a big waste right there. Those don't need to be on 24/7 for emergency lighting. You can do with very few foot candles for emergency lighting, one down at the end of the hall, one over here on this end. That's a big potential savings for rewiring emergency lighting as well. Exterior LED, here's an example of a parking lot with new, brighter exterior LEDs. There's a little bit of a better beam spread instead of just bright yellow spots in your parking lot. Other advantages are with exterior LED, there's the potential for motion sensors. There's the potential for if there's a whole section of your parking lot that you don't even want people parking in the middle of the night anyways, turn that section off. Just keep the lights on near the building. Past 11 or past midnight, something like that. People don't usually go to places that are so dark they can't see. And if there's a motion, and if you did have a motion sensor, you could, the police officer could say, why are these lights on in these parking lots that are normally off?
There's a security system.
Security.
Also, so that way, when the lights go on, the police know
something's happening there.
something needs to be checked.
Right. So that's a possibility, exterior and interior, really.
You don't need anything on when there's nobody there.
Right.
You don't need exit lights on when there's nobody. It's amazing how much a T5 exit light bulb puts out when there's no other lights around.
And so, for instance, we go to classrooms and there'll be 2 lamps on 24/7. And why do you need to? Right.
Those engineers said we need to have security lighting. For who? If
Right.
there's nobody there.
Right. So revisiting what was really put in is a good question. New construction case study. This is a renovation case study. So this high school renovated quite a lot. They went 18% beyond the code. They improved lighting. They improved the envelope, and they did a high efficiency HVAC. They got $100,000 of incentives, and it's just had a sort of a 4-year payback off of about a $9,000 savings. This is now in new construction. You have to talk about beyond code. This is $9,000 of savings beyond code. The new construction program that we help administer really is to push you beyond code. Now, as code ratchets up, that's harder and harder to get beyond code. So some of the older case studies, I would argue this 18% beyond code, the codes have increased since then. So that's, this is more than they would have gotten in recent years. We have a 1-page application, very straightforward to fill out, get in the program, get in the loop. We ask for your address, we ask for contact information. Sometimes it's nice to have multiple points of contact for a project. We ask for 2 years of bills and utility data. That's and then we go from there. And we schedule a site visit. We review bills, schedule a site visit, work on the report, give you estimated savings.
One application per building if you want to do multiple buildings, or one?
One per district, really, you could do. Right. You might you might be getting information as far as square footage of different buildings, and then getting your spreadsheet of utility use that you might already be tracking. We also ask for at least 1 or 2 physical bills or PDFs of a physical bill, because it's nice to be able to see your rate structure. Sometimes little towns that we visit get municipal rate, the reduced rates, or some weird things are happening. So it is good to get physical bills as well. Other incentive opportunities. Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation helps put small solar onto schools. They used to have some lighting programs. They have a program now that helps if you're going for a net zero building. They're really trying to push the envelope of what's capable out there. So that's one possibility. The Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation for additional funds for grants. ISVE, I hope those funds come back. We saw a lot of great projects go forward with those energy efficiency matching funds. So hopefully those can come back in the future. If you're in a rural area, the county board members have application assistants. They're a partner of ours as well. If you're in this metropolitan area, the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, they have ways to help people with application assistance. So you could come through our program, you could come through their program. They're pretty similar. Sometimes we share, we share resources, and you can always apply to our program. And if you're going to be more matched in one of these local programs, we can always match up with those as well, based on time and resources. Performance contracting we'll talk about in a moment, as far as ways to help pay for energy savings with energy, pay for projects with energy savings. I mean, sometimes we talk about banks for financing. Some banks are very happy with large projects to do energy efficiency financing. There's some USDA type of projects in rural areas especially, maybe not as applicable in this area. Certainly bonds, 1% sales taxes that pass, bond referenda that go forward. A lot of districts are doing big projects with those. Maybe there's some third-party energy performance contracting, energy service corporations, power purchase agreements, equipment leasing sometimes. These things are possibilities, and we have let's skip over this financing scenario. The Department of Commerce helps run this energy performance contracting program, probably for buildings in the $100,000 or more range, really big projects. Be there for a long time. That's pretty likely for most schools, and they would love it if you have a lot of low-hanging fruit as well, like those examples where you want to pair the low-hanging fruit with the expensive things to help the total payback of the project. The contractor so Dave Burr is a consultant with that program, and he's the person that reviews these contracts to make sure that the problems that we've heard with energy performance contracting in the past are when people get a bad deal, when people get a bad contract, it's a legal document, questions can arise. Hopefully having a state person, the track record on our program is pretty good, I think. And luckily, those problem cases are people that didn't get vetted fully, I think. Eastern Illinois University has an example of a big performance contract. They did chiller and cooling tower upgrades, chilled water loop, added buildings, retro commissioning. They did this energy center that we'll talk about on the next slide. They decommissioned an old coal plant. The example for some of the building upgrades that they did a $10 million building project and chiller and cooled water loops. They're saving about $2 million a year, and there's a little additional operational cost savings. They're saving a lot of water with this project. So we have, CO2, nitrous oxide. We have these other additional savings, water and pollution, in addition to just the straight energy savings that helps pay for these projects. This renewable energy center was a $80 million project to replace their coal plant, which was out of emissions spec anyways. And it's a natural gas burning, but they can also have the option to include wood chip. They can do gasification of their wood chips as an experiment at this plant. They also have some big solar panels. They can produce electricity from the back pressure turbine as a byproduct, and they've reduced CO2 by 80% compared to the coal plant, and they're the first LEED platinum power plant in the country, so that's pretty cool. More Illinois Energy Now programs. We haven't mentioned too much about the STEP savings through efficient projects. Has anybody had MIA come through and do STEP retrofits in their school? That's where they'll come in and they'll do lighting, occupancy sensors, installs. What kind of things did you have?
We had, like you said, the motion sensors.
Motion sensors, yep.
Then we got the pop machine motion sensors as
Yep.
well.
The soda machines, yep. Yep.
Or any refrigeration, basically.
Those just plug in. Those are just
Yeah,
straightforward.
it was everything. Everything was free. They come walk through, give you everything free. You install it, take some pictures, send it back. You had to verify that you've installed it, but it was a simple program, very simple.
Faucet aerators, I think.
With high efficiency. You don't want to put those in your kitchen because it takes 20 minutes to fill the sink.
But for washing hands.
For hand washing, things like that.
Right.
Yeah, all for free.
Good. So that STEP program is excellent. Those can be in combination with our SEDAC program, whether it's before we come in or after we come in or separate. That's fine. But they can help take some of those low-hanging fruit items that are easily installable on site. Natural gas boiler program we talked about those examples. We won't really talk about combined heat and power. I don't think anybody has a natural gas use all year long like a hospital would. That's not as applicable for high schools. Energy performance contracting we talked about. Public housing. Lights for Learning is a program that I think is phasing out, but it was a lighting program, but now everybody's pretty much done those lights anyways. And Trade Ally program, we talked a little bit about contractors. A lot of contractors are in this Trade Ally program with it's sort of a list of contractors that know how to use these incentives, know how to apply for these incentives. They can apply for them in your name. You get the check for the public sector programs, but these contractors can help fill those out. Engineering, lighting firms can help facilitate these projects as well. I don't think we need to talk about new construction. We talked a little bit about that already. There's some case studies of nice new buildings that were built, nice new schools that were built, nice white roof on this picture with a little 2 kilowatt solar panel array. Nice, beautiful, airy spaces. The computers are off. Sometimes people have to put a little sign on them that say the computer is asleep. Just touch the mouse to use it. I think kids understand how to do this. The only people I ever get pushback from is the IT people. That the kids don't seem to have any problem with that. We do training at our office in Champaign and throughout the state, like these programs that we're doing now. We have online training on our website. We have video case studies on our website. We have lots of handouts. We brought some of our handouts today. They're most applicable to high schools. And so in summary, we're part of the Illinois Energy Now program. We have these incentives that we help administer. You can call us for questions, for technical questions. You can talk to your contractors for questions about these, whether it's incentives from us or through them through this program. We have all of our services are free. Energy assessments can be a longer-term project. Retro commissioning can be even a longer-term project. But we'd love to work with school districts. We'd love to start with a portfolio review. We'd love to help everybody save energy throughout the state.
Andy,
questions? Yeah.
Will you tell us about? So I want to get my SEDAC in to examine my buildings and look at my bills. help run an analysis as to how we're doing and stuff. And then you walk around and talk about different energy saving things. And what's my commitment as a school person back to the program? I mean, what's the trade-off?
Right, what's the trade-off? Well, the trade-off is, so for one thing, you guys have already paid into these programs. So we would argue that you would want to be able to get your money out, both in our free services, but also in energy efficiency products, whether it's through STEP, whether it's through your purchasing and then getting rebates from getting incentives through the state program. For larger commitment projects, I mentioned how our SEDAC audits are maybe 3 months, 2 or 3 months, and also depending on when you get bills and how quickly you can get information to us, and when we can schedule a site visit. The longer-term retro commissioning might be 18 months. So the retro commissioning projects, we did have a stipulation of we require a $50,000 investment of implementation investment.
It's 10,000.
10,000. And you could do 50,000 too. That'd be fine. So $10,000 commitment. But for the normal programs, we hope that the time and energy that you're spending with us is part of the commitment and part of your commitment to go forward with these projects. We have some projects that don't really, they say they might sign up and they don't get us the bills very quickly and they don't really care too much. Those projects get a little bit more of a back burner for us. We try to work with everybody, and if there's projects that are raring to go, we're doing those projects first. We're scheduling those site visits first. We're getting out there.
I volunteered for USGBC to go out and do some analysis. And then the school that I was assigned to sort of faded off into the distance. They kind of fade off sometimes.
They're busy. People are busy.
Because they needed the bills. And it was like, oh my God, it seems too simple.
Just getting the bills.
Getting the gas and getting the electric bill.
Yep.
And that person changed, and then the next person said,
Staff turnover restricted, yes.
I don't know how to do it in my office.
Yep.
I can't get my business office to help me on the facility side. And then everybody gets to that frustration level, and everybody walks away.
Yeah. So hopefully we can get people over that hurdle. Hopefully,
but it does happen.
But it takes time, and it happens.
And internally, I think everybody here should be able to get their bills from the business office, or have the business office give you a spreadsheet of costs, kilowatts, watts, and then the month, and then it's easy to do a chart after that.
Exactly.
As a basic place to start.
Exactly. And that's where, so getting these conversations with the physical people and the business people, really these are all important conversations to happen as well.
Then you can get more into demand, load, and all the rest of those things. But start with the money and the KW.
And sometimes the business office is excited to do some of these as well, so getting them involved and part of that.
So if you don't ask.
So to kind of answer also, to add to that, we get your bills, and then we analyze them, as Andy was saying, and then we schedule a site visit. And that's a little bit of a time commitment on your part, taking us through the building and familiarizing us with what's in your building, the systems, and things of that nature. So it's not a huge time commitment.
No, I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying that, like anything good, you got to start.
Yeah. And getting the bills is sometimes the hardest part.
Are there any other success stories or things that people wanted to share about savings projects or?
I've actually worked with your program in 2 districts in commissioning, and I found what everyone was considering is I would strongly recommend it. Great to work with, very helpful with applications. Doing calcs for you, if that's not your thing, if it wasn't and still isn't mine. Or just letting you know you need this information from your VAS provider, we need that. And it was just really someone as simple as me was able to get through it. So that should illustrate a lot to the rest of you sharp guys. I have a simple question. In your estimation or opinion, is there ever, say like in a large space gym or something, where a constant drive air handler would be preferred over a VFD?
I'm trying to think. There's some situations like that. Sometimes we go into a gym where there's really not much duct work, for instance. There's not much static pressure on that system. I mean, maybe that's an argument to find out whether you're oversized, and then maybe for instance, maybe a VFD would be helpful in those situations. But if there's no reason to control a fan or a motor, then there's probably not really a huge reason for a VFD. I mean, you might get some soft start capabilities out of it, and you could compare, get a motor starter soft start versus a VFD.
So from an energy standpoint, there's really not much difference.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, sometimes low-loaded motors can have a lot higher power factor or lower power factor or worse power factor. So if it's a very low-loaded motor, if it's an oversized motor, and I think a VFD can help with the power factor a little bit, but we're not really being charged for power factor. Anyways, I mean, if you're a giant corporation that has giant air compressors or something like that, you might have a line item on your bill for power factor, in which case you might start looking into that aspect. But, maybe some power quality changes. I've had some clients that were having a problem with their communications was getting affected by some noise from motors or something like that. So there might be some instances where that could be. But you're right, that not every instance needs a VFD. We would say, motors over 2 kilowatts, 2 horsepower motors, that are used half the hours of the year and that are controllable. So pool pumps, for instance, a lot of times have a butterfly valve on the pool pump right there. Why have a restrictor valve when you could have a VFD? So the question is, are you going to control that motor, and is it controllable? And those would be the cases for VFDs.
How about on a new installation?
For new construction?
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if I would I don't know if I would waste money on a VFD if there's no way to control it. But there's.
But if you have a BAS system, would you think?
Yeah, if there's a signal to control that motor, yeah. If air handlers would be based on pressure sensors, so yes. If it's just a single unit in a single gym, maybe it's not ramping up and down though. It might just be running.
Just leave it full.
That could be, yeah. Case by case, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, but VFDs are becoming less expensive. They're becoming more reliable. I mean, you are adding a component to a system, though, so it does add cost and it does add maintenance. So it's good to consider whether it's needed or not. Yeah. I don't know if we have some other comments or questions. Ways of people. I always find it interesting ways people finance projects, ways people get projects going through. I feel like school districts tend to be bond items, tend to be 1% sales tax, tend to be cost, life and safety. Sometimes we see people putting in windows or making arguments for windows or boilers or insulation and life and safety issues to help pay for some of these projects. So being creative with the energy savings, it's not just energy that's going to help pay for these projects. A combination of things, I think, helps pay for these projects. We would love to work with more school districts. We would love to work with more large portfolios of buildings. We would love to work with projects that are anybody that's excited to do energy savings. I mean, we have a free service, but we would love to have people take advantage of our programs. Everyone should be able to take advantage of the STEP program right away, the savings through efficient products. They'll come out, they'll schedule a time to come, and they'll have a box of low flow nozzles, and they'll have a box of vacancy sensors, and they have equipment that it's like Christmas. They can leave presents for you right away. So I'd highly recommend going through STEP as a first step. I'd highly recommend coming to us for more in-depth detailed bill analysis and a more in-depth detailed building inspection assessment.
Well, and we have some applications here, and like Andy mentioned, there's quite a few different publications, but you can do this application online too. So, but this, you might want to take one just to see what's going to be required to fill out, and you'll see it's not much.
Right.
I also think that anybody who has old equipment and is considering, gee whiz, do I stay with this piece for another 5-10 years, or do I start making a plan and then, I don't know how I'm going to present this to the board because this old equipment is still running, but newest equipment will save me money and there'll be a payback. That's what these guys do. They come out and help you gather that data. Okay, yeah, I want to go from a typical 80% unit to a 94%, but what's the payback on there? Okay, maybe that's something that we don't regularly do in our jobs. And you know what it costs? What does it cost? It's free. Okay, free. We don't get a whole lot of things that are free.
In our assessment is unbiased. We're not trying to sell you a boiler. But if
No.
you say you need a boiler, I don't care if you get a welder, clean up pulse or whatever, you know. It's unbiased. We're not trying to sell you a certain product. What we're trying to sell you is energy efficiency. That's it.
And you touched on something which was working equipment. The way the laws are written, it technically has to be incentives for replacing working equipment.
Absolutely.
So there's an argument.
It can't be a broken rooftop unit.
Right.
Although I need to do this in the next 3 weeks because we're about to get into the
Yeah.
heating season. No, you can't do that.
Yeah. So it needs to be at least limping along. And we would also argue that things come along and funding will come along and you need shovel-ready projects. So ERA money came along in 2009. We needed shovel-ready projects. People went to their shelves and pulled off a SEDAC report and said, here's a shovel-ready project. Here's this list item of things that we should fix in our building. We're ready to go. We had some projects that got complete funding. It's like Christmas. You just win the lottery sometimes. It doesn't always happen. But having these reports, and sometimes you dust them off the shelf and you say, oh, I did the lighting, I did some of the low-hanging fruit, but boy, I really still need those boilers and those chillers. It's convenient to have this report sitting on the shelf.
Our government changed. Our
Government's
government
changed. Yeah.
And you went away for 2 years?
Yep, 1 year.
1 year? Okay,
1 year.
it seemed like forever. But 1 year, and there's nothing guaranteed for tomorrow. So get out
Do it now.
there and go after it.
Yep.
That's the thing I keep saying.
Yep. Well, thank you guys very much for your time. Really appreciate coming to your meetings today.